I want to welcome Jeff Shen, President of RedTeam Consulting and the Vice Chair of the ACT-IAC Partners Program in 2018 that I participated in. Thank you for joining me today, Jeff.
Well, thank you, Jeremy, for having me. I'm happy to participate.
So for those who don't know you, and there might be many who don't, tell us a bit about your background and where you're from and what you do, and who is Jeff Shen?
Sure. So for those who don't know me, I was actually born and raised in New Jersey, of all places, and the natural question is which exit, which I will not say. I'll just say up in northern Jersey. I was born and raised, and my family still lives up there, but came down here to this area to go to school to George Mason University, where I graduated with a degree in management information systems. And so that's a little bit of my history. That's how you and I eventually met, is I actually stayed down here in the Virginia, DC area.
So what made you choose George Mason?
You know, a few different reasons, none of which actually materialized. But when I was going to high school, there were a couple of friends that I had that were a little bit older that went to George Mason, and they were championship debaters, actually. And I was very big into speech and debate in high school, and George Mason was one of the nationally ranked teams. And I also ran track competitively in high school, and I was never good enough to get a scholarship in Division I, maybe good enough in Division III. But my plan was to not only walk on to the George Mason University track team, but also to try out for the speech and debate team in George Mason. Didn't try out speech and debate team, and I did one day of practice on the George Mason University track team, and I realized I don't belong here. But I enjoyed my stay at George Mason nonetheless.
Wow, that's interesting. And so what made you choose something in, management in the IT field?
So the era in which I grew up, and I'll just kind of classify it in terms of the 70s and 80s. I will say, I'm not saying I'm a geek at heart. I know your kind of tagline is the geek within, but I grew up in the era of the Commodore 64. Right. So yeah, everyone had the Atari 2600s, but when the Commodore 64 hit, we were all trying to learn how do you program in BASIC and, all those different old programming languages. And to me, that was interesting. It was fascinating. I enjoyed it, and, trying to find all the new games to play and such. And all throughout all the different classes I took, and you're going to correct me here, but like Pascal and Fortran.
Oh, that's great. Yeah.
So those are some of the languages that I took, I think even in middle school, maybe. And so when I eventually went to Mason, I was looking at all the different majors available, management information system, but also decision sciences. Those were the areas, math and programming interested me. And so that's where I started thinking, I could make a career out of this. During the summers in between college, I would try to find like temp jobs that allow me to use a little bit harder. But I thought, I think I could program and code as a career just after I graduated. Didn't turn out that way, but that's what I thought when I graduated. Interesting.
So what brought you to RedTeam? I know that there's probably a big gap of time between that, graduating George Mason and RedTeam, but what along that journey, how did you end up at RedTeam?
So I'm going to try to keep this a little condensed because it's a really interesting path when I look back at it now. And so my first job out of college was CSC, right? So for those of you that might not be old enough to know, Computer Sciences Corporation, multi-billion-dollar corporation, both commercial and government. And I was actually on the commercial side of that business, and I was hired to code in mainframes. So this is, JCL, COBOL. And back when I graduated in the mid 90s, companies were starting to move off of mainframes and go to client server. It was already in client server at that point. And so I did a lot of jobs doing Y2K testing. Wasn't a lot of fun, Jeremy. I don't know if you've ever done Y2K testing.
I'm very familiar. I had to worry about BIOSes on computers and stuff. So yeah, I'm very familiar.
And so I did that for a good amount of time until, maybe the 97, 98 timeframe, realized that's not the path for me. I had a really good mentor who I'd like to give a shout out to, Brad Stein, who still is active in our industry. And during that time, late 90s, it shifted all to web technology. And so that's where I started learning how to code in active server pages. I know you're big in Microsoft active server pages, Java, C, Cold Fusion, all of those. And I joined a .com consultancy during the late 90s and spent a few years there. But the one thing that I realized early on in my career, Jeremy, is that I was absolutely terrible at coding. Like if the Y2K disaster actually happened, like I might have taken some of the blame for that. I don't know if I caught every single error that happened during the Y2K testing. And then when you move from mainframes to web technology, I did not get any better. In fact, I would argue I probably got a little worse. And so, you start realizing as you go through these careers in IT that you're good maybe in some areas and not good in others. And one area that I realized that I was really strong in was working with people. So I transitioned really that coding programming pretty quickly to doing project management, program management type work. So I actually did some of that delivery work early on in my career and then shifted into business development. And so it was really during that 99 to 2001, and it was during the .com, .bomb, that I got my first, real taste of business development and sales pretty quickly. And then after the .bomb occurred, I started working for government contractors. And so that's when I kind of took my first step into GovCon. Worked for a mid-tier integrator, ran business development teams, ran sales teams. I left mid-tier integrator, worked for an Alaska Native Corporation during the early 2000s as well. Was there for about 3 years and was a part of really fantastic growth, helping grow a really small Alaska Native corporation to a much larger corporation within 3 years. But a funny thing happened along the way. I was running a great sales team. I was running a division within the company, but I actually got let go.
Wow.
Yeah, I got, and I remember sharing this with a few of the partners in our partners class, but I got let go. It was the first time ever in my career where, I know people experience this, where you have great success and you build great teams and the future looks bright and it gets cut short and you don't know why. And at that point in time in my life, it was 2006. I relatively newly married, and I'm thinking, I never want to feel like that again. Like I literally would never wish that upon anybody else. And so I kind of swore to myself at that point moving forward, after I got pushed out from this company, that I need to work for a company or start a company where I will not treat someone like that, or will I ever be treated that way. And so fortunately, that's when I joined RedTeam Consulting. And RedTeam was founded by Carol Stobie. She and I were coworkers back at that mid-tier integrator from a few years back. And so it was really just her and a couple of independent consultants, and I was the second employee. So I know there's a long story, Jim, but I needed to kind of show you the transition from when I was a coder all the way to joining RedTeam as an employee.
Well, and I think, I would guess that you would find that your background in the technical did, make you successful in the business development.
Oh, absolutely. A lot, every step of the way. If you think about the mid-tier integrator, I essentially ran the solution sales team. And so although my team of business developers, they had sales responsibilities, they were the SMEs, right? And so they're the ones joining customer visits to explain how the solution works. And then when you look at the Alaska Native Corporation, we had 4 divisions. We had IT, we had healthcare, we had telecom, we had architecture and engineering. But, I was very heavily involved in the IT and telecommunications. In fact, I enforced upon my team, all of my sales folks, that if you don't understand the technology or the solution or how it works, and you have to rely on everybody else, then I probably don't need you as much as I need the solutions people to explain how it works. And so it kind of carried itself throughout, even until today, in how I want people to understand how things work. And I just don't need, someone to show up and shake a hand, right? I need someone to understand the technology and the solution.
No, it makes a difference. When you're approached by somebody who's, pitching their product, You can tell who knows what they're talking about, and you can tell who's just reading, marketing speak. It makes a difference.
Yes, yes, absolutely. Mm-hmm.
So you've been around a little bit, since the 70s and 80s, and you've been been government consulting for a while. So what's something that you would think that we need to consider some change? So, the way we do government in industry consulting, it's complicated. There's a lot to that. What's something about that you see an opportunity for us to change that can make things better?
So, interestingly for me, because Red Team today is still heavily involved in technology procurement, so I'll just kind of leave it, we do proposal support of a wide array.
Mm-hmm.
The area that interests me the most is procurement. And it's the one area that, as I've grown Red Team, is that it's a never-ending study for me, that I want to, and it's not that I'm trying to seek out to become this procurement expert. It just fascinates me how the government procurement, it just works in general. So if you were to ask me what is the one thing, there's probably multiple things I would change, but if there's one thing that I would try to look to improve or work on, it's procurement. We work on an outdated set of rules that I know that the government updates, but it truly is outdated. And the challenge is that we can interpret it how we want in terms of how the government buys, but too often we default to how it was done before. And so I would look at procurement reform, but really take a hard look on how we can make government buy more efficiently. And it's not just government, it's industry too, in terms of the industry influence in government procurement. I mean, that's the one thing that I would look for us to try to advance.
That's very interesting. I think that's a really good change to want. As a government person, from our perspective, or at least from the places I've been, I agree with you. We fall into a rut, right? We don't want to do whatever level of effort it's going to take to get it out the door. So we do it the same way we've always done it, which doesn't necessarily mean we're going to get the best solution, because we're not giving those on your side better guardrails to propose really innovative ways to get things done.
Exactly. And Jeremy, it's just going to get harder, right? I mean, if you look at all the stuff that you probably deal with, at your agency, as technologies become more advanced, robotics, AI, machine learning, all these different advanced technologies, many of which we don't even know what's going to happen in 3 years. How does the government procure those, right? We think tech challenges and code challenges and tech demos, and we think that's like latest and greatest. I would argue that's kind of, now we need to look ahead, and is that the best way to procure? Can we use score sheets like how GSA uses for innovative technologies? Like, I don't know, right? I mean, maybe it works for some procurements and some agencies, but it won't work for others. But unless we have a team continually brainstorming, right, of how we can improve that, then we're always going to fall behind.
Interesting. Wow. That's a big thought. I'm going to probably think about that the rest of the day.
Every day. I
do a lot of government procurement. I love contracting. I love diving in and understanding how I can try to leverage within the rules I have to work in a better way to procure things. And so that's a really thought-provoking suggestion. And yeah, definitely I'll be thinking about that one for a while. So
when you figure it out, Jeremy, I should be the first person you call, and I will lose less sleep, thinking about it myself.
That's true. Well, have a drink and discuss.
Yeah, exactly.
So, okay. Well, where do you, for Red Team Consulting, where do you see opportunities? Well, actually for you yourself, I know you're wrapped up in Red Team. Mm-hmm. It's a big deal for you. So where do you see yourself in Red Team, maybe in the near to mid future? What's the growth opportunities look like for you?
For us as a company, obviously we want to do well, we want to prosper, but part of that really comes down to, are we doing everything we absolutely can to support our clients, right? And so we work with close to 200 companies every year, and these are small, mid-tier, large companies. In fact, our largest bucket of clients are mid-tier companies. And if you hear the feedback or complaints from a lot of mid-tier companies is, how do we compete? Maybe that's why we're in business. But we're always looking, we're always striving to find ways that we can improve how we support our clients. Coupled with that is being good partners with government, right? Until we truly understand what the government is looking for and how they procure, what we were just talking about, I don't feel like we could be good stewards in supporting our clients. And then, and kind of encompassing all this is that I want us to treat our people, better than anyone else. We work really hard to build such a strong culture. And part of that culture is empowerment. And it's a little shocking, I think, to folks that might come into Red Team, that you're going to come in, you're going to own something, and we're going to push that person to own that work. And so we work really hard to kind of build that empowerment within the company. So, looking ahead, for me personally, as I mentioned before, I have to continue learning, right? I feel like, Jeremy, you're the same kind of person, right? Unless you push yourself, unless you're in this constant position where I'm learning something, then like for me, like what's the purpose? So learning how to grow the company, learning how to treat our people better, learning how to treat our clients, better than we have in the past. And so those are the areas that kind of drive me and hopefully will propel Red Team to continue to grow in the future.
Well, and on that note, thank you so much for joining me today, Jeff. It's been great catching up with you, and it's been great hearing, your story a little bit. More than I knew before. So every time I talk to you, I learned a little bit more.
Well, thank you for having me, Jeremy. It was a pleasure being a part of your podcast and webinar.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.